Hello, everyone. Welcome to IT for KM, using technology to enhance knowledge management. I'm Becky Burke with the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration. This webinar is sponsored by the TRB Knowledge Management Task Force, the AASHTO Committee on Knowledge Management, and the Northeast Transportation Workforce Center. And I also want to tell you before I forget that you will be able to look at this presentation. It's being recorded and it'll be available to you at the TRB KM website. You'll get a follow-up email tomorrow with a link that'll send you to it. And I'd also like to remind you to please use the chat box if you have questions for the presenters, and we will answer questions after each presentation. So in my opinion, today you're in for a real treat. I've seen both these presentations, and I immediately after I saw them, I asked both presenters to do this webinar, and they graciously accepted. Jez and Jennifer are going to share their experiences with information management as it relates to knowledge management. Often information and knowledge are used interchangeably when in fact they're not the same. So information is a part of knowledge management. So to get started, I'm going to introduce you to Jez Arroway. Jez began developing the information management program at the Idaho Department of Transportation in July of 2017. And Jez comes to ITD with 19 years of experience in libraries, having been a science and engineering librarian at the Claremont Colleges in Claremont, California, and the director of Portneuf Library in Chubbuck, Idaho. Currently, Jez is researching the applications for artificial intelligence for information and knowledge management, and thinking strategically about bringing greater governance and accessibility of knowledge, information, data, and records to ITD. So today, Jez is going to share how we must first begin to manage the information before we truly dive into knowledge management. So Jez, take it away.
Thank you, Becky, and thank you everyone for coming today. It is my pleasure to be here to speak with everyone and speak to you. My name is Jez Arroway, and I am from the Idaho Transportation Department. I have been here just a little over 2 years, and that also means that the information management program is just a little over 2 years old. So this is all very, very new for us. And I was hired to build and develop the program. We already had a very robust records program that now is in my unit, and we're expanding into data analytics and data management as well. But this is all still very new for us, so we're kind of starting from scratch. And so I'm here today to talk to you about our journey, where we began, what we are doing, and what are some of our strategies for building information management so that you can then build upon that knowledge management. Because in my opinion, if you don't manage your information effectively, you couldn't possibly manage your knowledge in a way that helps to build the knowledge corporate identity that people need to do their jobs. So where did we begin? Our ecosystems is essentially just like this big giant flea market. People wander in and they pick up something on a table, for example, and they look at it and they turn it around and they examine all the sides and they set it down thinking, well, maybe there's something that's better, and they go over to another table, but it's not better. So they try and find the original item, and it's just a mess. We don't have any formal structure. And so if you want to conceptualize what our information, data, and knowledge looks like, it really does look like a big giant flea market with stuff strewn everywhere. No real way that things are organized or laid out or presented to the users. There wasn't much retention, adherence to retention, and it was really difficult for us to talk about disposition and to talk about what we needed to do when we actually needed to go through a life cycle and dispose of stuff. For example, we are in the process of migrating from our SharePoint on-premise to SharePoint Online. And that SharePoint on-premise had been here since 2010. And as a result, when we were looking at everything, about 85% of it was just rot. It was redundant, obsolete, and trivial. So not records, not relevant information. And as you can imagine, when you have such an incredible amount of stuff that is irrelevant to work, when you go and try and search for stuff, you can't find it very, very easily. So this is a problem that wasn't just in our SharePoint, but in other tools and across file shares, and there wasn't any sort of cohesive way for how we were going to manage what we have, identify what we have, and present it in a way for people to use it effectively. So my slides are not, hang on just a second. My slides are not advancing, there we go. So we're also really dealing with a lot of different silos, and I think a lot of you can probably identify with this. So the majority of the information that we had in our systems just isn't accessible. So we've got file shares, which a lot of you probably have, but people also used email as a system of record. People put stuff in their desktops and all of these other different closed systems and databases. We would have stuff that maybe other business units could use for data-driven decision-making that was just completely inaccessible or unknown even. And as a matter of fact, we had one instance that was shared with us where a group bought a data set for significant sums, tens of thousands of dollars, and we found out later that we actually owned that data and it was sitting on somebody else's system. So we have all these different silos, and it really causes a lot of user frustration. So an industry standard is that 20% of your time is spent searching for something. And this definitely is the case here with us as well, because one of the things that we learned, we did a huge survey. We sent it out to the entire state, and we had about a 74% response rate, which we thought was really pretty good. And the majority of our users identified to us that they spent greater than 7 hours a week trying to find information and then recreate it when they couldn't find it. That is very, very frustrating. It is extremely wasteful, and it causes a lot of difficulties with trying to make progress forward. So if we had thought about how we would kind of organize our digital landfill and how we would eliminate some of these silos, then we could actually have greater searching and finding and less time and frustration spent, because you can only imagine how derailing it is. And I'm sure that all of us have had this experience, even when we use Google to try and find something. We enter our search terms in, we can't find it immediately, and then we start to spin our wheels, and it gets really frustrating really, really quickly. Our systems of records are simply just not used. So because we have so much extraneous information and because stuff is so siloed, we would bring in these beautiful systems, we would build these beautiful systems, we would architect these systems, but then they quickly became overloaded, burdened, and abandoned. And people would go back to emailing stuff back and forth, trying to figure out where it was on a file share. And instead of us developing a methodology towards managing our systems of record and managing what we had in our systems, we would just get a new shiny tool. And so what this meant is that we ended up with this massive ghost town of stuff. And we have these beautiful systems full of content that is just abandoned, neglected, and unused. So what were we going to do about that? Well, the first things that we needed to do is we needed to reach out and we needed to educate and we needed to explain the why. So what is information management? What does that mean? And what does it mean when we're talking about how we need to have governance in our systems? So we decided that we needed to spend 50% of our time on outreach and education. And yes, that's a lot, but we needed to explain to every single person at the transportation department what we meant by a life cycle, disposition, structure, organizations, why you would want to use the system of record, why you would want to delete stuff. We really needed to start to focus on what this meant, because you can't expect anybody to follow through with your set of criteria or standards if they have no idea what it is that you're talking about. And we still have that 50% of our work is working with people, is teaching people, is educating, is reaching out. And this also means anything from educational opportunities, webinars, trainings, but it also means we're getting involved in work projects. So how can we participate in your project? How can we be there to make sure that we are with the frontline employees, talking about their experiences, talking about what they're doing with their work so that we can help fill in the gaps and help really facilitate information management starting at a really at a grassroots level. Because we can tell the management all we want, but if the management doesn't trickle that through the entire organization, there's a lot of people that don't have the same skills and abilities and understanding of what we're talking about with information management. So here's an example of one of our educational posters, and this is the CRAP criteria. It's actually used in academic institutions and in secondary education to help learners understand how to evaluate materials for research. And my background is in academia. I'm still an adjunct professor at Idaho State University teaching a class on information retrieval and searching and finding. And I still use the CRAP criteria. So I was like, hey, this can really work with us helping to identify what our information looks like. And so we use the CRAP criteria when we're looking at stuff that is not a record. So records are separate, right? It's pretty clear what a record is, how it relates to a record series, what it is defining, and how long we need to keep it. But not everything is a record. And this is where we needed something else that we wanted to explain what our information was. And so the CRAP criteria stands for current, relevant, authority, accuracy, and purpose. And we have these really great posters that breaks this down. We talk about the CRAP criteria when we look at digital information. And is it current? Is it relevant to your job duties? What is the authority of the document? What is the authority of the data? How accurate is it? Can you trust it? What is the purpose? Why are we reading it? What are we doing? And even though this was crafted for evaluation of materials for research, it's really useful when we start to look at all of this digital information. If we think back to the digital landfill that we have with the first slide and the flea market, if we start to sort through kind of our digital hoard and we apply the criteria to non-records, this really helps us to figure out what it is that we need to keep and what it is that we need to get rid of. The second big push that we have is we're working on building a community of practice. So we have an information management governance board. We have got representatives from every different work unit. We still have 2 work units that we are incorporating new members into. HR and our Aero division. We do have aeronautics at the Transportation Department in Idaho. But everybody else, finance, highways, all of the different districts, data analytics, you can name a different part of the Transportation Department and we've got a representative on the governance board. And this is a way for us to run our ideas past a group of people. We don't want to make a decision for information management in a silo. We want to make sure that when we talk about new standards, new procedures, we want to have a group of people that can listen to what we're talking about and provide us with feedback. So we take everything to the governance board. We meet every other week for an hour. And we talk about the things that we're doing. We give updates to different projects. And then we also have some sort of learning that's sprinkled in throughout the year. And this is a nice way to get a cross-divisional group of people to come in and share their experiences and let us know if we're on the right path, because we need that input to make sure that we're making decisions that are going to be effective. We also have a community of practice of records coordinators. So all of the people that somehow manage records across the state, and this is a pretty extensive group of people that we have. They meet with our records manager a couple of times a year, and they talk about different things that they can use, strategies for managing records, how it is that they can look for business value versus retention, and all the different elements of the records retention schedules that we have. We also are building a community of practice of data stewards. So there's a lot of data that transportation departments use, and we have people from across the entire state that are looking at the different ways of managing their data. So we talk about data dictionaries and metadata, and we talk about, you know, how we can start to build sort of the methodologies to effectively manage this. One of the big successes that we've had with the data stewards is that we have created and implemented a third-party data quality standard. So this helps purchasing identify which different data set options might work best. So we can actually look and say, well, if we have a choice between two data sets and we have this data that meets the standards, that is going to work well with our systems, it's going to work well with what we do, that is shareable, that can be discoverable by the rest of the organization, that's going to have preference over this other data that may not have all of the elements. And that was really important for us to do because we're buying a lot of data or otherwise acquiring a lot of data to help make decisions. And we need to make sure that we can actually use it effectively. So that was a really huge win for us, was building that third-party data quality standard. We're also continuing to really build the foundation of what we mean by information management. And again, the unit encompasses information management, records management, and data management. And eventually, as we mature, we will also have knowledge management as well. So we have an information management strategic plan. That strategic plan was built with the community of practice input. So they reviewed it. They talked about what is relevant, what is our vision the same as their vision, and then how is it that we can make stepping stones towards building that structure, but then getting towards the actual final product over a series of years. We've been developing policies, and we've got 2 policies that are going through the review process to establish what is the information management program. We regularly review other policies that we've got. So we just recently reviewed the system of record policy, and we also have a records management program policy. We're building a lot of standards, and these standards are really important because it helps build sort of an operating framework for people to think about how they're managing their information. And the most important part of that is, of course, communication, because again, a group of us can make this. We, the information management unit, can make these decisions and these policies and these standards and these plans, but if we're not communicating that out to people who may be beholden to the sorts of things, again, we're not explaining the why. We're not reaching out and helping. So one of the things that we've been doing is we actually grab a standard, and we build a poster about the standard. We hang the posters around throughout headquarters and mail them out to the state, the sheds, and the other units, business units, and district headquarters, so that everybody can kind of see these different fun posters about an otherwise very kind of esoteric and boring topic. I mean, let's be honest here. Information management is fascinating only to a certain niche of us. The rest of people just need to know, what is it, the expectation? What do they need to do, and how is it going to benefit them? So we'll just pull a standard, we'll pull a policy, we'll pull in something, and we'll just put it up onto these posters. And so we have a formal communication plan that we have built with the governance board that involves all sorts of different educational opportunities, articles, and things of that nature. So where is knowledge management in all of this? Well, we really need to get all of our stuff in order. Users need to know where to go. So that means that we need to define system of record, that we need to actually use those systems of record. And if we have legacy materials, how can we get the materials that we need to keep out of those systems into systems? So we've done application rationalization initiatives here. We've done a lot of other programs where we have identified what are the key systems that we're going to use, and how is it that we can build a methodology towards saying that records and information of this type is in this system, and this is where you need to go. This is, of course, going to make a much more efficient search and find process for everyone, because instead of looking in their email and looking in a file share and maybe asking somebody if they've got a file, or looking in different systems, they know where to go because we've been able to really clearly define this. And once we have got that down, and we've developed the methodology of keying the truth and trusting the system, then we can start to build our knowledge together, and we can use other knowledge management methodologies, because we have our knowledge contained in specific systems, and it doesn't have to be a digital system. We have stuff that are on microfiche, microfilm, we've got stuff in paper, so we have different systems as well, and as long as we're able to define what is in each of those systems and where those locations are, then we know where to go when we need to use that information to teach, to learn, to transfer our knowledge around, and to build an effective knowledge management program. So what is our future state? Well, we're trying to figure out with cloud computing and moving into the cloud, how can we leverage different bits and pieces of artificial intelligence to help make sense of the digital information that we have. So one of the things that when we look at different systems and different options for cloud computing, we always ask that question: what kind of artificial intelligence do you have, and how could we use it towards managing our information? We're in the process of building a taxonomy. So this is really important, because then we can use that in conjunction with a file plan. We can use it in conjunction with other metadata, and have sort of a business taxonomy that helps people sort and organize their stuff. So we're also looking at a data catalog, and this is a new initiative for us. So we're really starting to bring this in line based around the survey results that we got. We just need to start taking all the information that we've been collecting over the last 2 years about what systems do we have and where does stuff live and what's this server address and how does it tie to a record series. We need to put it all together into a data catalog, and so we're looking at those. We're also very interested in search and retrieval. So as we start to get into these systems, how can we use different APIs to pull them together so that we have a cohesive search? You know, how can we Googleize our information? And when we deal with print, microfiche, and microfilm, we're considering that as well, because in a data catalog, you can still catalog the physical location of things. So you would just indicate that this particular record series is in District 1, in this room, in these different places, and we can do that pretty easily. We're also going through an ITIL revolution here. So we are modernizing our IT, and that is the Information Technology Infrastructure Library. It is a methodology for managing information technology, and we are learning from the knowledge management process of that, trying to figure out how we can use that then to expand knowledge management, not just in IT, but throughout the entire organization. So that's where we are, and that's the end of my presentation, and I'm certainly interested in any questions that you may have.
Well, we do have some questions, Jess. Thank you for that presentation. It interested me all over again, so got me going. The first question we have is, when you implemented your information management system, did you do so with the idea that it would eventually lead to a KM system?
We have multiple systems, and I would be interested in figuring out a KM system in the future. So we have got several flagship systems of record at this point in time. We don't have an idea of one system being all-encompassing for another, and so we've kind of decided to split the difference between here is your one system versus, well, here's the system for these very specific purposes. And we are trying to choose our systems of record based around what APIs that we can use with them, so that we can then leverage all of those different systems together into a cohesive place. I'm looking forward to developing the knowledge management in the future, but I have not selected any particular system for that yet.
Okay, thank you. We have another one here. Did you face any internal difficulties when trying to sell an information management system to higher ups?
Yes, we have definitely had our growing pains, and we still continue to leverage the communities of practice that we have been building and explaining the why in our education and outreach to help our higher ups really understand what is it that we need. And we are in a good place right now because we've got the survey results from across the state, and it's been supporting what we're saying. It's supporting what we've been finding and giving us a fairly good, clear path forward, because now we can go back to some of our leaders and say, look, this is what your staff are saying about this. This is what the rank and file, those frontline employees, the critical people in the organization, this is what their experiences are. And by doing these things, we can help alleviate some of this. We can refine our weights. We can become a little bit more lean. We can really tighten things up by implementing some of the concepts that we're talking about. And so the survey results are going to be wildly successful for us, because now it's not just 3 people. That's the size of my unit right now, 3 people talking about what we need, but now we've got this broader voice from across the state. So of course we've had a little bit of growing pains, and I anticipate that we will still have some more, because it's not going to be an overnight change. I mean, this is when it comes down to it, this is really a cultural revolution. It is a change in the perception of how we own and manage our information on behalf of the people that we serve. So it's not going to be overnight, and I anticipate that we will have bumps along the road, but we'll just continue to reach out to people, talk to people, answer questions, participate in projects, and push our agenda through education and outreach.
Okay, thank you. And we have one more question. It's kind of along the same lines, but in the early phases of your journey, how did KM Champions get senior leadership and IT on board?
Well, I'm in IT, so that's that one at least has been taken care of. And we still have, there's rumblings about knowledge management. There's an identified need that we need to do something about it, but we are not really sure what we're going to be doing about it just yet. So we've been talking about how we can grow and develop. And I've written some job descriptions for knowledge strategists, knowledge managers, knowledge librarians. And we've been talking to people about how if we were to expand this, we would have these people do this kind of work and these kinds of strategies. And so it's been very helpful being involved with the AASHTO Committee on Knowledge Management, the TRB Committee on Knowledge Management, or the Task Force rather on Knowledge Management through the Transportation Research Board, because we've been able to build a lot of ideas, and we've been able to tie it into these job duties and say, this is what a future could look like if we start to really emphasize the existence of our knowledge management. So it's still very much a work in progress, because prior to me being hired, there was no one that was really pushing that knowledge management agenda.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Jez, for all that. And now we're going to turn to Jennifer. And let me introduce Jennifer. Jennifer Hawkins is a knowledge management professional with 15 years of experience in policy development, program outreach, and information technology. She is currently the program manager for knowledge, learning, and collaboration at the Peace Corps. Jennifer is a featured speaker at digital training events around the globe. She has spoken to audiences on 5 continents on the importance and merits of capturing institutional knowledge and becoming a digital workplace in the 21st century. She graduated with honors with a degree in economics from Harvard University. She also holds a Juris Doctorate from Georgetown University Law Center and a master's degree in sports industry management from Georgetown University. And today, Jennifer will share with you that after 10 years of trial and error, the Peace Corps launched PC Live in 2015, the agency's first ever global sharing platform for, the global knowledge sharing platform for staff and volunteers. She will also share how they reviewed, reset, and revived this initiative, as well as where the agency is going with knowledge management overall. Jennifer, go ahead.
Hi, it's so great to be with everybody today. Thank you for that introduction. I didn't realize it was that long. But we will get started. The Peace Corps is an interesting place. So let me tell you a little bit about Peace Corps, because not everybody is familiar with our setup. So we're a global organization. I think that much a lot of folks know, in over 60 countries. We have 2,500 staff worldwide. But one of the unique things is that what we call U.S. direct hires, so those that are employees of the federal government hired directly by the United States serve 5-year terms. Now, for a small percentage of folks, these terms can be extended. I'm actually on an extension right now beyond the 5 years, but that's limited to just another 3.5 years max. So usually you get extended 1 year at a time. And so what that leads to is a lot of turnover in terms of our US direct hire staff. We also have host country nationals, and those are individuals who work for the Peace Corps, but they are natives of the country that we're serving in. So they live there, they're from there, and so they don't have any term limits. And so that'll come into play when we talk about where our institutional knowledge sits. You want it to be with the people who are going to be there longer than 5 years. And then we have about 7,500 volunteers in the field, and they serve anywhere from 3 months to 27 months. And so the typical volunteer is a 27-month term with 3 months of training and then 2 years of service. Sometimes we have what's called Peace Corps volunteer leaders, and those are volunteers who've already served their 27 months and they've extended for an additional year. And then we have what we call Peace Corps response volunteers. And these are short-term stints where the country has expressed a need for specialized knowledge. So these are usually mid-career to later in their career professionals that can come in, do some quick capacity building, and then they come on back to the US. So like I said, anywhere from 3 to 12 months, 3, 6, 9, or 12 months. And all that's important to kind of understand where we are in terms of being able to capture and then effectively share our knowledge, because we have constant turnover. Now, one of the things I pointed out was that our US direct hires can serve 5-year terms. Well, I don't know about you, but most of the time you're not going to wait, till year 4, the 364th day before you start looking for a new job. And so what people end up doing is they get to about the 3-year mark, and then they start looking because they're thinking, I have a family, I have bills, I have other responsibilities. Maybe I'm interested in going back to school, like grad school. And so they start looking around that 3-year point. So really the average staff member is there for about 3.7 years, 3.5 to 3.7 years. So that's pretty quick. So that means we constantly have people coming in and out of the organization. And so it leads to a perpetual reinventing of the wheel, because when you've been there 6 years, like I have, you're considered, an old veteran. It's like, oh my gosh, you actually made it past 5 years. And that's a really big deal at the Peace Corps, since so many people don't make it past 3 or 4 years. So that's something to keep in mind as we go through this. So some of our early attempts date back to 2005. We had a system called Guru, and the idea was that staff could put all their information in there, and then they'd be able to go to it at any time. Well, the problem with Guru, and you see it lasted for about 6 years, was that there wasn't really a lot of thought process given to the taxonomy. So this is where the information management piece comes in, because you have to think about how are you organizing the information, how are you, what is your taxonomy, what is the metadata that's attached to it, how are you encouraging people to contribute to it. So it eventually became a dumping ground, and they knew around 2010, 2011 that they needed to do something new. Then we tried Global Online Village, and as you can see, I said that was dead on arrival because of the cost. The Investment Review Board at the Peace Corps was like, we're not paying millions of dollars for this system. And so in 2013, the agency launched the first version of PC Live, and this is all prior to me joining the agency. So in 2013, they launched PC Live. The thought was, okay, now we just need somebody to get in and run it now that we've got it built. And they posted a job announcement. And I was thinking, as I'm looking for a job around that time, I was like, well, that looks like something great. And so I always tell people I was bamboozled, but it's okay. The job description said, come run our SharePoint 2010 site and just train our users and provide technical support. And I was thinking, yeah, I could do that job in my sleep. This is great. But it turns out it was difficult to use. There was a lot of technical and human infrastructure required, much more than the one person, me, that they had hired. It still was a dumping ground. there was literally incomplete functionality. So some of the links, it would have the link name, and then in parentheses, it would say coming soon. And there were about 30 links in the navigation that said that. And I said, well, everything is coming soon. When are we going to actually do it? The search and organization was subpar for sure. It just wasn't attractive. It turned out to not be a mobile friendly or responsive site, which in 2013, 2014 was certainly a requirement. And then volunteers actually couldn't even authenticate properly on the site. One of the things you'll notice, if I go back a slide, you'll see that we had Facebook, Google, and Yahoo as login options for volunteers. This is where the technology and really your implementation of the technology is super important, because we had those three options, but one, we had older volunteers who maybe didn't have any of those accounts, not Facebook, Google, or Yahoo. They might have had an AOL email or something different. So there was a lack of consideration for generational differences. What we also didn't think through was the fact that when you log in with one of those mechanisms, it had to check against a database to make sure that you were really who you said you were. So for example, if I was a volunteer and I used, let's say I had, I don't know, a school email address, which is very common for our volunteers, because a lot of them are coming, a good 80% of them are recent graduates, so they're still using their .edu account. I used my .edu account to apply to become a volunteer. And then when I get to this PC Live site, it's going to force me to use Facebook, Google, or Yahoo. Well, I might have one of those accounts, but that's not what's stored in Peace Corps' database. So it can't talk to each other. It can't identify that this Facebook account should go with this .edu email address. So volunteers were just getting stuck because we didn't have their Facebook accounts on record, or we didn't have their Gmail or Yahoo accounts on record. We had some other email address for them on record. So those are the kinds of things when you have to think about what are your barriers to using or to being active in whatever KM program or KM initiative that you're trying to implement, and is the technology itself a barrier? And in this case, technology was absolutely a barrier. So one of the primary takeaways is that you have to use the data you have, because failures are a treasure trove of lessons. So one thing we learned was, as great as it is to be able to log in with your Facebook account, if we don't have any record or any database of what people's Facebook accounts are, we can't verify their identity that way. So therefore, they can't log in, and obviously they can't use the system. So we took all of these things and we let that inform how we were going to move forward. And so that's where we decided we would partially reset. So we've reviewed where the pain points were, and now we need to reset. It doesn't mean that you have to completely start from scratch, but you do need to be strategic about what additional requirements you need to collect. And then you choose the technology that meets those needs to solve those problems. So just going with the login example, we obviously need to choose a login and user authentication method that will actually work. That's kind of a big one. And then we can tackle the other things like the search functionality, the organization, the ability to access the program or the platform on your mobile device, because that's where people have been for the past several years, is primarily on mobile, specifically for our volunteers in the field, where they're not walking around with laptops, or they certainly don't have a desktop computer. They're going to be on either a tablet or their smartphone. So those are the things you want to think about. And then you think about the design flexibility of the tool. It can be a really, really powerful tool. And I always use the silver platter versus trash can lid. Things just look a lot more appetizing on a silver platter. And if you give somebody something great, a great meal, a T-bone steak and a perfectly baked potato, but if somebody serves that to you on a trash can lid, you don't want to eat it. And the same thing goes for the design of our technology. If we don't make it look the part, nobody is going to be interested in revisiting that site and making it a part of their daily activity. And then you have to be honest about what you can reasonably support. The original vision for PC Live, and we still haven't even to this day fully realized that, was for it to be this open ecosystem for returned Peace Corps volunteers. Those are our alumni, currently serving volunteers, staff, no matter where you are. And we have to be realistic about what can we support, what can we really manage with the staffing and the resources that we have, and that's where you want to be decisive. And so a second takeaway I would say would be that you can sometimes save money from starting over instead of forcing what you have to work, and that's what we did. We were like, we're going to start over in terms of the technology, but we're not going to start over in terms of what we want to do and what that vision is. We just take the lessons that we've learned and we're going to build on that. The other takeaway I would say is that you have to be candid and honest with your audience about what's broken and how it will be fixed. One of the things I had to do when I first got here was pitch this. So the question, the question we had previously was, did you run into any resistance, with your leadership? And I came into resistance, not recognizing that that was the situation I was walking into, but that's absolutely how it was. So this system is called PC Live. And when I was first introduced, the joke was made, oh, she's here to take over PC Dead. Oh, I'm sorry, PC Live. And I was thinking, PC Dead, oh my gosh, what did I step into? And that's because for several years, for those who had been here for Guru and for Global Online Village and now for PC Live, there was just a lot of disappointment. There were a lot of unkept promises. And we just had to be honest and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And then, of course, you always want to make sure you deliver and execute on what you say. But as long as you're realistic and honest, and if you need to step down the expectations and set expectations appropriately, then that's absolutely what you do. So now let's move into the revival part of this, and it's going to be the same vision as I previously said, just new execution. So we wanted to make sure that we had an extensive resource library, because that was what was most important, is that everybody around the world is creating these great resources. If you are a volunteer in the field, working in education, over that 2 years, you might come up with or create an outstanding curriculum for your students. And let's say that you're serving in Uganda. Well, there's a volunteer in Mozambique who could also use that curriculum, or another volunteer in Moldova or in Cambodia who could also use that curriculum. So you want a place to be able to share that with them so that they can use it, maybe adapt it for their local context, and then they can build on that as well. So what we want to do is prevent people from having to reinvent the wheel. And that's where we go from just managing information and we start to mature towards true knowledge management. And so we added that social component so that now people are talking. Hey, what were your lessons learned? Okay, this is your curriculum. What were the pitfalls? Was this your first draft, or is this 10 drafts in? How did you get to this lesson plan? How were you able to cultivate a garden in an arid environment if you're an environmental volunteer? So things like that. So that social component is really where we start to mature beyond the information management and really starting effectively capturing people's knowledge in the field. Open sharing, a community vetted system. So we definitely take on the Amazon way of thinking. We put everything there, and then we allow the community to let us know what's valuable and what's not through a 5-star rating system. So if I see something has 5 stars, great. If I see something has 1 star, well, maybe we need to review it. Maybe some quick enhancements to that resource will make it more valuable, or maybe it's just got inaccurate or outdated information and probably needs to be removed from the library as you go through your curation process and managing that content. So the takeaway from here is to be realistic about what can be done, but don't shortchange yourself, because there's always a bargain. And so the next phase is baking it in. So that was something that we had to learn, was that not a lot of people made this a part of their everyday lives. So we took every initiative that the agency was involved in, from Let Girls Learn to Read for Life, Feed the Future, and we started baking in using PC Live. So every conference, every workshop, every training session, and these are the pictures here are training sessions from Ghana and Madagascar. So wherever we had to go, we went. And we just, whether it was employee orientation, a volunteer facing training, a staff facing training, and we just kept repeating over and over, if you need this, if you need this, if you need this, go to PC Live, it's there, not only to retrieve information, but also to share. And so you always want to keep in mind, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. So you have to give people practical solutions. Make this a part of their everyday lives so that they don't forget about it. The other big thing is what I call building your hype squad. Everybody, I'm sure, got tired of hearing my voice in the early years of this because I was just trying to be everywhere. If you would give me 5 minutes to talk about PC Live, I'd take that 5 minutes. Eventually it grew to 30 minutes, then it would grow to an hour, then it would grow, it grew to a day-long workshop. But what really got people motivated were the ambassadors and the champions, the people you work with every day in your office. And the pictures you're looking at are actually from other folks, not me, that they created a Hunger Games scavenger hunt for finding things on PC Live, and really got the staff there involved in using it and wanting to use it more and wanting to spread it throughout their country. So these are the kinds of things you want to keep in mind: is have your ambassadors, have your champions. It can't just be your voice. It gets monotone and it gets boring really fast, no matter how great you may be. So you want other people also spreading that message. And then you want to market, reward, and train. People love a good contest. People love to get rewards. And so what you're looking at here is a game show we had. SYK stood for Share Your Knowledge. And we would host this game show, and the teams that would win, who could identify where they could find stuff on PC Live and how they could find stuff, really helped get people excited about it. And so I encourage you to always make it fun, always leverage whatever training opportunity you can, and get as creative as you possibly can. Because at the end of the day, people love stuff and people love to brag. I had people wearing their buttons and their PC Live patches and their wristbands, and they had pins and water bottles and bags, and they would just always want to participate more and more, and others would get more interested. Well, how can I get that? Well, when did you go to that training? Well, why didn't they come to my country for training? And I'd be right there. Hey, if you want us, in the Philippines, we'll come to the Philippines. If you want us in Mexico, we'll come to Mexico. Wherever you want us, we'll do this. We'll host our events, and get your staff and your volunteers excited about using it. And then the last thing I want to share is that you have to require action. And so we wanted everybody to take ownership of this system. It's not just something that one office at the Peace Corps headquarters is pushing out to everybody. We want everybody to support, promote, and grow the site, because if you don't have people participating, then it really doesn't matter. And so we would give them this action planning guide at the end and say, what actions can you take by when? What training and resource needs do you have? Because we can help support that. And who will lead the effort and who will support it? For different roles, if you are a programming and training manager, if you're a Peace Corps volunteer, if you're a country director, depending on what your role is in the organization, the actions you can take will be different. And so we wanted everybody to identify, what can I do in my role to support and promote and grow this site? And ultimately, that makes folks accountable. And then you see people rising to that expectation. And so I want to offer you just a quick checklist. Deliver your State of the Union, write down what you already know, because those lessons learned from any previous missteps are certainly valuable. Prioritize your must-haves and your nice-to-haves, and then choose your technology. That's important, but all of the other stuff leading into that selection is really what you want to do the correct way. And then map out your support model so that people aren't just left hanging whenever they want to actually use it. And then you want to build your demo, shop it around, see what works, do some usability testing, conduct your testing, and make those adjustments. And only when you've got it there, take the plunge. It's okay if it's not perfect, because you can always iterate, but you at some point have to say, this is the drop dead date, and we're just going to take the plunge based on good feedback and good information. Now, if your usability testing proves that it's a complete disaster, okay, then don't take the plunge just yet. Go back, make the necessary adjustments, and then take the plunge. But ultimately, if you kind of follow those steps, and if you come in honest and candid and really ready to tackle people's pain points and what they experience every day, you'll be able to use that technology successfully to start capturing, sharing, and transferring knowledge more effectively in your organization. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was awesome. We do have questions. This first question is a list of sub-questions. Can you describe, well, we'll take them one at a time, but can you describe how a volunteer shares ideas gained in the field they can directly upload to a central hub, or does someone vet ideas before submission? We had a similar system that had issues with quality control.
Right, so there's two, the answer to both of those questions is yes. So volunteers can just upload, they log in and they upload their content to a system, to the central hub, which is PC Live, and they fill out a form so that we at least get, when they submit it, there's a form submission so that we at least get standard information from everybody. The type of vetting we do is just for completeness of what is submitted, and to double check to make sure, we're not breaking any copyright issues. We did have somebody, although it was great, and they had a lot of zeal behind it, but they scanned in a book. And we can't share that. That book is published and copyrighted. But the only checking we do is to make sure that the submission is complete. And then we use a community vetting feature so that the community being volunteers and staff, can say whether or not this resource is valuable, useful, accurate, correct. Just like I said on Amazon with the rating and reviews, that's similar to what we have on PC Live.
Thank you. We have another one. We ended up with a cluttered system that had suggestions more than practices. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes, a lot of that will come with your with how you built the site with your categories that you set up. And so we do have tags for best practices or data-driven or data-proven implementations, so that we can say, okay, what is a question from the community, or where somebody's just saying, hey, I think this would be a good idea, versus what is time tested and actually we can put some data behind it. And so we categorize those differently so that people know what they're looking for and can find actual answers, not just suggestions, although there's certainly a place for people to suggest, make suggestions, but we know that sometimes you just want to know what others have done and can you prove that it's worked.
All righty, next question. How did you organize the content on PC Live so that people could find the information relevant to them?
We have, our volunteers and most of our work revolves around 6 sectors, along with 6 cross-sector programming priorities. And so our 6 sectors are agriculture, education, environment, community economic development, health, and youth and development. So those are the 6 main sectors. And then we have another 6 cross-sector programming priorities. And so that started as the central point of our organization. We knew we wanted to group content by that, but we also have some other categories, and we just basically did an agency tour, an office tour. What kind of information do you need? What is the expertise of your office? So that gets more at the specific knowledge expertise that different offices bring to the table. So we also have an emergency response category, safety and security category, volunteer life category, because a lot of volunteers were like, I just want to know how people survive for 2 years in their communities. Everything from, I need gluten-free recipes in the country I'm living in. Everybody puts gluten in everything. How do I make this work? To now I have to ride a bicycle every day and my chain keeps breaking. Can somebody show me how to fix it? Because this is not a problem I ever had before I moved here. So, it just took a lot of interviews and finding out what the categories were that were of interest. And I worked with our librarian, who of course had a master's of library and information sciences, to really develop that taxonomy.
Okay, we have another one. Can you say more about the technology used? Is it all web-based?
Sure, yes, it is. We use open source software, Joomla, which is very similar to WordPress or Drupal. It's Joomla. And it's really a website. And then we've built some extensions into it, like the social component, so that there's more like a social network, our own little internal Facebook, if you will. But we felt that it was important to go with open source, one, because of cost, two, because of the flexibility and the extensibility in using open source. There are certainly plenty of cons, just as many cons as pros. With open source, that means you're taking on a lot more of the development responsibility, but ultimately we felt that was the way to go.
Okay, I have a couple more questions for Jez that came in when Jennifer started. Let me get up here and find it. Oh, there's two of them. Jez, they want to know if they can receive a copy of your information management strategic plan.
I will have to ask if I can release that. So I have not been able to release some other things in the past. So I will ask. So if you can submit your contact information to the organizers, I will follow up with you once I have determined if I'm able to release it.
Okay, then I have another one for you, Jez. How do you break open those guarded silos?
Well, that's a really good question. We're still working on that. One of the things that we really focus on is working with people to help break down some of the barriers and perceptions. And the community practice has been really helpful with helping us develop strategies and talking to people about how we can circumvent the problems with the silos. And we're relying really heavily right now on the survey results that we've got. We've got a couple of different presentations. We have an hour long, we have a 20-minute long, we have a 15-minute long, and we're giving those as we can. And then people recognize, they're like, oh, I have that problem too. And then, well, here's the solution to that. So a lot of our work towards absolving those silos is working one-on-one with the people who are managing those silos or experiencing the work in silos to get them to understand that this is really in everybody's best interest. If we stop putting this in places where others can't get to it, but we figure out methodologies for sharing it and talking about it, then we will just make everything much more efficient and effective for everyone. So we're still really working on that, but we've had some tremendous successes with building the governance board in our communities of practice. A lot like what Jennifer's talking about with the ambassadors, it's really the same thing. We've got now people that are going out and talking about this, saying, oh, well, you shouldn't put that in a file share. Maybe you should put that in a system of record, and let me tell you all about that. And that is a really important part of that.
Okay, we have one last question for Jennifer this time. Let's see, because we're running out of time. Jennifer, what are the cons of open source software?
The cons is that a lot of times if you don't have a tight development shop, you can kind of hit a wall with how to actually extend the platform. And there's a lot more monitoring that you have to do and staffing up that you have to do, as opposed to buying something off the shelf where a company is just managing it all for you. You have to do a lot more to manage and build and develop the site. There's no big vendor behind it developing the site.
Okay, I need to wrap up because of time, but thank you, Jennifer and Jez, for wonderful presentations, and all the people who attended, and behind the scenes, Omid. And again, you'll get an email probably tomorrow with a link if you'd like to go back to the presentation. And I thank you again and hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Wonderful opportunity.